Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Exploring the Spectrum. Today we have with us Cindy Rucker Trost. She is a writer, a teaching artist, a published poet, an actor who teaches an acting class in the Creative Aging program at the Wallace Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts. She is also the mother of Hunter and joins us to share about their journey. Thank you so much for joining us, Cindy.
Thank you, Julia. I'm happy to be here.
So, to start, can you please paint a picture for the listeners about your early journey with Hunter and what you experienced?
Yeah, Hunter, uh, I had I was induced for one thing. I'm going to start like way back at the beginning because it's quite a story. But after a long day, 6 o'clock in the morning till 8:15, he came into this world. But there was a lot going on. He had to be helped out with the vacuum on his head. There's like just chaos going on. But um, so he came into the world and like, he didn't cry. And I'm like, what? My baby's not crying. What's wrong with him? What's wrong with him? What's wrong with him? And the nurse turns around and it's all wrapped up and it's just his face and looked like Mona Lisa's smile and just little eyes open. And the nurse said, he's happy. I was like, oh. And she put him in my arms and it was wonderful. And then he had to, he spiked it. I spiked a fever. His, heart rate had dropped. So the next day they're like he has to go into the NICU for 4 days. And I was like, oh, my baby. So he was off in the NICU and he finally came home and then proceeded to cry for like 23 hours a day for like months on on end. I was like, what the heck? It was rough. It was rough. We spent a lot of time in this big green lazy boy reclining rocker that I had got when I was pregnant. Um, just trying to figure out how to soothe my boy, turn the vacuum cleaner on and just let it sit in the floor until it made black marks because the rubber just kept going round and round in circles. Put him on the dryer, watch baby balk, things like that. And I had a friend one day who, said she'd watch him for a while. So I could sleep. I was like, we were at the park and I like fell asleep on the blanket and she's like watching him. She goes, okay, he's hard. She goes, it's not you. He is hard. And I began to, I go to put him in his crib, and he was just screaming and screaming. And one day, I just took off my shirt and I laid it on him, and he grabbed it and held it up to his nose, and he sniffed it, and he just relaxed. And I was like, oh my God! So I started taking like a bag of like clothes with me if I had to take him, like to the my friend's house to babysit or something like that. I'm like, okay, I wore this shirt like for weeks. Like, it smells like me. If he really gets going, just like break glass, hand to the baby. And so those were the things were starting to pop out, these sensory issues. I had a friend that said, she worked with students. She was a physical therapist, said, maybe a sensory integrative dysfunction. I was like, what? I don't, that just sounds strange to me because I had never heard of such a thing. But then as he developed and grew older, I noticed things as a toddler. If he was sitting on the grass and he went to get up, or he was in a sandbox, he wouldn't use his hands to push up. He would use his elbows because he didn't want his hands touching certain things. Or if we were going for walks as he got a little bit older after that, if it had rained and he touched the handrail and it was wet, it was like acid. Um, so there were just a lot of those things that began to happen, and we started seeing a doctor because, in addition to those sensory things, he had off the scale ADHD. I mean, climbing bookcases and trying to escape out of the house and taking off running. And we were, we went took the kids to church quite a bit because it was a place where they could be in daycare and I could actually kind of get a break for a few minutes. Like, okay, I just need to chill. But he would escape from the room and like, poor 80-year-old Miss Smith had to go chase him down the hall and they're like, he almost gave her a heart attack. She had to run after him today. I'm like, I'm sorry. Um, yeah, because he did like to escape and then just go running. Um, yeah. Uh, so eventually, we started seeing some doctors. One of them thought he had developed something called Sanfilippo syndrome, where neurologically the brain begins to regress. And once you get to be about 3 or 4 years old, and um, thankfully, I am happy to say that that wasn't it, but it was also part and part of moving towards the autism diagnosis. And so I really do appreciate for parents. It can be scary in many ways because they'll start throwing out all of these things that are just um, heartbreaking, devastating. And, at time from about 2, 3 until 7, we just went through a series of different medications to address symptoms, and then it finally coalesced into an autism diagnosis because we went through the alphabet: sensory integrative dysfunction, um, OCD, um, what else was it? There was, uh, oh, uh, what was it? Something defiant. Um,
Oppositional defiant disorder?
Oppositional defiant disorder, that too. And I ultimately said, do all of these letters of the alphabet coalesce into one thing? And finally, like, yes, your son has autism. I was like, okay.
What was it like for you to finally get a kind of coalesced explanation? When you finally heard autism, what was it like for you as a mom or as parents?
It was a relief. In many ways, it was a relief because at that point, since he was 7, he was in school, and from an educational point of view, it opened up the treasure chest of supports that a child could get, because without the autism diagnosis, it was a 504, and just were not, um, there just wasn't the same level. And Hunter needed more. He needed speech therapy. He needed occupational therapy. He needed a reading specialist, and he needed an aide, a one-on-one aide, because he did like to escape. Get a call from school on a rainy day, walk outside, there's 2 teachers with an umbrella, and Hunter's the only one out there climbing all over the jungle gym, splashing, running around, covered in muddy water and dirt. Hey, mom! It's like, "Oh, son, come down. No." So, yeah, things like that.
Those labels that people will throw around before an autism diagnosis is given, a lot of those labels are really pointing to bad behavior in a kid. He's oppositional, he has poor attention. Like, it's all of these character flaws essentially that even at a young age these children are picking up on the language.
Yes.
So,
And seeing in a room full of people, and this was something from early on, elementary school, middle school, and even in high school, Hunter would do the exact same things other kids would do, and I mean, just typical behaviors, and it would somehow be bad Hunter, that's bad, you don't do that, you don't touch other, you don't, you know, pick up your friend's pencil and start writing with it without asking. I was like, all kids, that's not an autism thing. But yet Hunter would get called out, and it would be like you'd have to have this whole conversation. And I did find over time that there did become a standard at which kids with autism or ADHD were held to a higher level of behavior. Like the box was so small that any step over the line um, that's autistic, that's ADHD. They need to, did they have their medication today? He needs to settle down. Perhaps he needs to go to timeout. Hunter, do you need to sit in your chair, in your little beanbag in the corner? It was just like, okay. It got very frustrating. And younger kids too would, when he was, I remember, I think it was kindergarten, um, went to school. I was sitting in a chair and reading time, and Hunter is sitting next to me. And out of the corner of my eye, I noticed some movement, and I watch a kid reach over and poke Hunter. And then Hunter, like, was reacting to that. I mean, it would get him going, and he would get called out for it. And I was like, Excuse me, he poked him. Like you don't see the antecedent. You only see Hunter's reaction to it. And so that became a thing for me too. Every time I get called into school for something, I'm like, okay, what happened before?
Mm-hmm.
What happened before this behavior? Well, I mean, we didn't see that. I'm like, right. So it's kind of interesting that it's always uh, pointed towards the kid's reaction, uh, the behavior that happens to come out. He yelled or he got frustrated or he locked himself in the bathroom, whatever the case was. It's like, doesn't anybody want to know why? Like, Hunter, what happened? You know, just have a conversation with him.
And so, you're getting this perspective, you're able to see the bigger picture, but you're also noticing that the schools are not set up for this level of complexity. And when Hunter was in school, did he have any friends that kind of stood up for him? Because they're in it day to day. Did he have peers that would be that intermediary between the pokers and his reactions?
There was along the way, like maybe in third grade, there was a boy who was friendly to Hunter. Um, but no one that really was like, "Hey, leave Hunter alone. He's a cool guy. You guys should really, you know, um, look out for him." And once he got to middle school, that really went away because that's when kids really, if you're into sports, you're now starting your, middle school football and you're going in these different directions and, really part of social interaction is you gravitate towards people that you have common interests. And so Hunter didn't have any of those interests, and it was really hard. They all were forming groups, and it was just, he had a sister. She got him, and so those things were challenging. Being able to help him understand that he would one day find his group. Um, and that was when we had a lot of opportunities when Hunter was uh, right around middle school to leave. We lived in Texas at the time and moved to California. And that was when we enrolled him in the Peers program at UCLA, which was like the science of making friends. I read about it in a Time magazine article called, how does Johnny make friends or how Johnny can make friends. It talked about a teenage boy who was having difficulties with friends in this program. And I thought, well, when Hunter gets to be that age, I want to enroll him in that program. And so when he was 13, we moved to California and sought out the program and he enrolled. And um, it gave Hunter and I a common language because the parent has to take the 16-week course too. And so we'd have things like, did you reach out and, call someone today? Or did do you ask questions, oh, so what do you like? Or things like that. Did you share? And um, yeah, it was good. It was good for us. It was a great start. It took years before the work done in the program was tangible. It was manifested in a way that you could actually see it at work. But it was the very beginnings, the building blocks for starting down a journey of building better um, social experiences for Hunter.
You mentioned that it took years for the things that he learned in that program to really create the changes in his social network. And what what was it like for you as a mother, knowing that he has this challenge with creating those bonds, knowing that he's trying and still not seeing the output?
Yeah,
What was that like for you, and how did you navigate that personally?
yeah. Heartbreaking, to be honest, really heartbreaking. And he and his sister are very close. And in middle school, they sat together at lunch all the time. And it was heartbreaking, not just for Hunter, not to have anyone for a long period of time that got him and cared about him for who he was and exactly the way he was. But it was heartbreaking, um, knowing for her that she had to make some choices. Being Hunter's sister, she paid a price as well in many ways with her own social interactions with people, like people who were mean to Hunter or said, I don't like your brother, or, your brother is this or that. And she had to make decisions. Were they going to be people she kept in her life or cut out? And she, you know, as a result, uh, she had a very, very, very small friend group herself. She was very bright. She was honor student. I mean, she did a lot of stuff. She was involved in a lot of activities and well respected. But she really um, was in a place where she had to be. Uh, she just took extra care in who she allowed into her world, and she did become very much an advocate. She would see people who would use the R word. And she was like playing volleyball one day and she just took the ball and said, "No, this game stops right now. We don't talk like that. You don't use that word." And so she just really became a very early advocate for not just her brother, but for a lot of people that surrounded her, students in school, who might have had some social difficulties or autism, or, frankly, were just different. I mean, because there are people that are just different and they don't have a label. That's just personality. Yeah.
This is something I hear oftentimes where the family members and, the siblings of children who have any kind of disability, any kind of challenges, that they become kinder people. They say it themselves that they learn early on that difference is not disorder, and they learn how to navigate. And to me, I'm like, yeah, perhaps we all need to be exposed to more differences to be able to be better as a society.
Noelle has, at a very young age, 'cause she's his younger sister, he's 27 now, she's 25. I think even back in, she was 15. Um, where there's always the talk about the cure for autism. And both Hunter and Noel, are strong advocates with autism doesn't need to be cured. There's nothing wrong with us. We don't have colds and and we don't have cancer. So, I'm living a good life and I have the potential to have a good life and to be a contributing member of society. So there's nothing to be cured here. And Noel is, uh, often said, the biggest problem for Hunter in this world isn't Hunter, it's all the other people, that they're the ones who are at their heart, sometimes cruel, cold, unforgiving, um, small-minded, as opposed to being open and loving and embracing. Um, so that's, autism has actually made us better people, I think, in my family. So in many ways, we do see Hunter as a blessing. And it was the journey worth taking, I have to say. I think I've mentioned this to you before. I wouldn't I wouldn't change a thing as hard as it was sometimes, so I can get into some of those hard things later. But if he were sitting on a shelf in a department store, I would walk in and go, "I want that one." And I would pick him up and I would take him home. That would just be it. That would just be it. No, that's it. I would. I mean, um, I feel bad sometimes. I think what I'll add to that is that sometimes parents get lost in the moment of what's happening, and they really just can't see a week down the line, a month down the line, 5 years down the line, 20 years down the line. When Hunter was in the sixth grade, we found out he couldn't read. He was at a first grade level. He couldn't read. It was like, what? When we had the reading specialist and we had the this and we had the that and we had the one-on-one aid and all the special education and all those wonderful supports that I do believe are very, very important under that autism diagnosis at school and the IEPs. I couldn't read. And it's like, wow, okay, so now we have to address this thing. Hunter's in graduate school now. He's studying to be, he's getting his master's in clinical psychology to work with people who have autism and in the LGBTQ community. And guys, I can just tell you right now, never when he was 5 or even when he was 15 would I have ever imagined that that would happen. I never thought it couldn't happen, but in that particular moment, it certainly did not seem like it was part of the journey, the path that we were on. And it's really wonderful to have hope, to have always kept hope that today doesn't define Hunter's tomorrow. Um, yeah.
I'd love for you to dive deeper into that because any parent that's listening is probably wondering, like, but how do you do that when they're having a meltdown? How do you do that when the teachers just said this or the physicians just said that? Can you share maybe some tips or at least your experience?
Yeah, my experience with it is really having to come to this place of separating autism from the individual and step into Hunter's world or even his body and understand the things he wasn't doing were being done with malice or on purpose, that who would choose to freak out because your hand touched water? I mean, who would choose to want to have the sound of the fire drill at school be so excruciating that you have to wear those headphones you take to the gun range, and your parents get a note the day before a fire drill so that you made sure they were in your backpack? Nobody would choose that. Um, and and I really just felt like it's unfair to to lump the two together and think you're just a bad kid because you're not. If you didn't have a leg and couldn't walk, I wouldn't make be mad at you because you can't run. I would be looking at you like, well, you know, what can you do? Let's figure that out. And so I really got to the point where I stopped thinking about the things that Hunter couldn't do, or that at the time I didn't think he could do, and really began to focus on, all right, it's a big world and there's a lot of options here. What can he do? And so through different therapies and working with other um people who, and none of these people, I'm talking about private pay, these were like people that we went to, doctors that were part of education system or referrals to specialists and things like that, because I think some people spend a lot of money and get very bad information or feedback. But there are lots of resources out there that, um, like Child Find had a chess club that I took Hunter to, and it was all kids with autism or ADHD, and at a very young age and things like that. So there's a lot of resources out there, but that can be overwhelming. It's like, where? So separating the label from the human and really seeing him first as a human who wants to be loved, wants the same thing that all the other kids want, and understanding that he wasn't a discipline problem, and that I couldn't time out autism out of him. I couldn't, at the time, you know, like the paddling or anything like that, So it's like it's not a discipline problem. And the point that I accepted that was really good for me. Because I grew up in a authoritarian thing, and if you're told don't talk, don't talk, and if don't do this, you don't do that, don't touch that, you don't do that. It's just like, and just going, he wasn't trying to poke his fingers in fans because because I turned around one day, and we are like in some store, and I had a big fan and his finger is like this, and I was like, "Wonder." And he just, because he wants to cut his finger off, he's like, oh, that's cool, like I wonder what that is. It's like, so the diligence it takes can be exhausting, but they don't ask to be here either. Like, he didn't ask to be born. um I I brought him into this world, so I'm responsible on every single level every single day, every minute for as long as it takes. He's 27 now, and I'll still be his mom when if he's 64 and I'm 80 something, 90 something. But um, yeah, he didn't ask to be here and he didn't ask to have it. So all I could do is love him.
And he was your firstborn, so I imagine you had a lot of ideas about what parenting will be, what are the tools that you'll use as a parent. Are there any are there any of those predictions or those expectations that you had to shift and then realized, oh, wait, that was actually bad advice to begin with after you shifted?
100%. 100%. Um, I vividly remember, okay, when this kid is born and subsequent children, I'm making one meal. We are going to cook this dinner and they're just going to have to eat what we eat because in my house, that's what we did. If we had liver, which I hated, I would have to sit at the table till midnight and I would have to eat the liver and, and gag on it until I couldn't stand it anymore. And then I was like, okay, that's just what you do because, kids just have to do what they're told. And Hunter wouldn't eat to save his life at some point, and he was getting skinnier and skinnier, and I'm just like, "Oh my god, what am I gonna do?" And he liked peanut butter and jelly, and so when he was in school, he had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich every single day for lunch, not just during school, in the summer, in the winter break, from the time he went to school, he was 3 years old, until he graduated from high school. That was just it, uh and then his sister became one who would like she would eat and she'd be like, "Save my food for later." She'd take 2 bites. And I remember my mother-in-law once was like, "But you never eat it later. Eat your food." And I was like, we don't we don't have a food problem in my house. She wants to save it for later, she saves it for later. Hunter wants to have, you know, yogurt, let's do yogurt. I mean, tried to make it relatively healthy stuff, but that was a big one. Food, an issue. But it was really good because it allowed me with my daughter to then not make food an issue, not make it about you have to eat everything on your plate because she was healthy. I mean, she wasn't anorexic, and I mean, we're talking she's like 6. She doesn't eat a lot. She's a, little kid with a high metabolism, but yeah, that was a big one. Um, oh, let's see, what else? Some other difficult ones, I guess, that they would study and that they would do well in school. You will study. My husband grew up in a house where they said Trosts are good at math. So you're going to be good at math, so these benchmarks about um, you know expectation where you have to succeed at this or you have to be an A student, not a C student. I mean, it wasn't really until I got to college that they were all like, C's get degrees. So that's a good thing. And that kind of drive, poor Noelle, to the nth degree, she never got anything less than an A until at some point in college it became very, very um, counterproductive that she was in a situation where she was challenged to get a B. It's like, yeah, your task this quarter is to not get an A. You really like you can do it. And so she'll call me. She goes, "You're not going to believe it. I got a B on a test today." And it's like, good for you. Love it. Nice job. Because the benchmarks for these kids, not just people with learning disabilities or autism, but neurotypical kid, sorry, not neurotypical kids. I don't like that term, but for um, non-autistic individuals is so high that it is mentally unhealthy, I think, for them, emotionally unhealthy.
It is unhealthy, and I see this a lot in some of the younger kids that I coach, and it's this perfectionism that just keeps going and going, but things get more difficult, and they have to figure out how to be okay with not being perfect, but that's now become their identity, and it's usually rewarded by parents being happy, teachers being happy, like all this positive reinforcement for something that's breaking them inside.
Yeah.
And to normalize, like, you don't have to be like that. That takes a lot for a parent, especially if they were raised that way and their parents were raised that way.
Yeah. It's equally I write a lot in my poetry about generational trauma and things like domestic violence and child abuse and that whole spectrum. But it's equally generational perfections are passed down. You are a good student. You are this. You are attractive. You are thin. You are that. And it is, I think, equally um, can be traumatizing to young people to be have to um, just have this massive family agenda that's dropped in your lap when you come into the world. Like you have to live up to this expectation and you have to, be this and do this and do that. And you're just like, I can, it's too much. Yeah.
And as you said that, something else came to mind. It's the comparison and the rivalry between siblings.
Oh, yeah. When I was growing up, because I was academically uh, gifted, it just things came easier to me than it did my younger sister, who was about 13 months younger than me. We were just, 1 year behind each other in school. And I was older. And not just even with our parents, teachers, students. My sister always heard, why can't you be like your sister? Why can't you be like your sister? Or, my parents and teachers are, Dee's staring out the window. She's very distracted. She daydreams. Cindy, gosh, she's so focused and she's so this. And my sister grew up always being compared to me in a way that when we were younger was not healthy for our relationship. I am so glad we're very, very close today, but it certainly isn't because the adults in our lives made a point of making sure that we appreciated each other's differences because many times they were used to pit us against each other. Really, really unpleasant. I have to say again, a teaching lesson for a parent is like, I might not have even thought to do anything differently given the way I was raised. If Hunter wasn't diagnosed with autism, I might have been like, come on, Hunter, what's wrong with you? How come, and, and so now it was like, finding the good in both of them and holding it up and going, yeah, but Hunter would say, I wish I was like Noelle, or Noelle might say, I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys, your sister's good at this, you're good at that. These are wonderful things for both of you. And actually, the beauty is maybe some of the things either one of you is not so good and the other one is. And so you come together and you're able to, bring more to each other's lives.
So the lesson of interdependence versus competition early on, the lesson of accepting difference. Can you imagine if more of the world learned this during these early developmental stages, how much kinder we would all be to each other?
Yeah. And I know it's hard. I have seen moms go, I need an answer now. I need a cure now. I need this to end, you know, right this minute. And I really feel badly for them. Feel really badly. I inside too was, early on was like, okay, what was he like 2 or 3? I started down the journey by saying to my husband, okay, one of us needs medication. Either I need medication or he needs medication, but somebody needs some medication in the in this house because this is not working. Um, and there are moments where it just seems like, uh, you know, Hunter at some point, when he was a kid, would have, rage. He would just be "Ah!" and kicking, and I'd have to pick him up, and arms flailing and feet going, and it's like wrestling alligators and rolling around, and he's screaming and he's biting me and he's like kicking me and hitting me, and I. pick up cans of corn in the grocery store. When I turn around, he'd hurl it at my head or take his shoes off and throw them at me while I was driving or try to kick out the windows. I mean, I'm seriously, I painted a picture of Hunter that up until this point, but those are real, true things. We would drive past a Target and he would turn, he'd be in his car, car seat, and he'd start banging on the window, red dot, red dot, red dot. Like, I want to go to the store. I want to get a Hot Wheels car. And I would have to find different driving routes to go places so I did not pass a Target. Um, but I did. And he didn't he doesn't do that now. He doesn't bang on the windows when we pass Target. He probably stopped it maybe around, he stopped banging on the windows and saying it maybe when he was about in the sixth grade. So then it just became, hey, can we go to Target? Target. Um, and so the behaviors changed as he changed. That has a lot to do too with growth and development and time and maturity. He had a pacifier until he was 7. He went to the dentist and the dentist is like, that's really going to mess up your teeth and you're going to have to come here and get more fillings done. And he was just like, okay, I don't want to go to the dentist anymore. But we couldn't get rid of it because nobody would have slept for 7 years because he would have been screaming and very hard to get to sleep. And so, he's 27 and he doesn't have pacifier anymore. You know, didn't take it to school, didn't this. So I just really had to also accept that he's 5 years old today. What he's doing right now, he's not going to be doing when he's 15. Now, the opposite could be true. It could be 100 times worse. But I just figured I'll just deal with 15 when I get to 15. Right now, we're at 5. And we got a long way to go before we're at 15. So let's just get through today. Um, so just it's like the whole mantra, one day at a time. In the end of the day, went to bed. I went to bed. We woke up. New day.
I've heard many times that we talk about milestones in early childhood development, but milestones continue throughout our lives. And sometimes with autistic children, like you said, he's not going to be doing that at 15,
Mhm.
but he might still be doing something that a 10-year-old is doing.
Yes.
And how did you balance this while Hunter was growing up, where you're accepting the moment as it is? Okay, maybe he has not reached this yet, but then balancing that with upgrading your perspective of him as he does outgrow those things,
Yeah.
so that you're not continuing to see him in that particular light of childlike habits.
Yeah. There is some balance. There is some give and take. Um, because as Hunter got older, there were things that he did or wanted to do that I actually use the phrase like autism isn't a get out of jail free card. You are going to be held to societal standards and you're going to have to conform. You're going to, if you learn to drive, you're going to have to follow the rules of the road. And just because you have autism, if you just decide you don't want to stop at stop signs, you are going to get tickets or you're going to go to jail. So as he began to mature, there were things that okay. He had a blanket. Loved his blanket. Loved his blanket for years. Kept it. There's still remnants of it in a plastic bag in the archive of his bedroom somewhere. Some shape or form is left of it. Um, and when he was a little boy, fine. You could carry it around all day long outside. That's fine. And then it became okay. Um, Middle schoolers don't carry their blankets to school. So we have to make this an at-home thing and adjusting to that to go, I understand you need it. It brings you comfort. What are some things that we can substitute that's appropriate your age and space? Squeezy ball. So now he's got a little squeeze ball. He takes it, when he has a test or something like that. Um, if he's tense, he'll lean a chair back and then put the ends of the chair on his feet and kind of put pressure on his own toes, instead of, saying, you have to squeeze me right now and give me a hug. So as as he aged and matured, we would look around and go, okay, what you're saying you need is something to soothe you. What you're saying you need is something to calm the stimming that's happening in you. What you need is to you're not understanding the way someone is saying something to you, because that's also a part of autism, is auditory processing, that sometimes the words, they need to be said in a different way. You need to start advocating for yourself. Tell your teachers, hey, can you explain this different? I know it's a lot to ask, but I need to hear it. Can you be slower? Can I take pictures of it? Can I read it differently? And so as he got older and matured, we just began to come up with coping strategies and self-advocating. And he also too, he's a young man, and he wants to be independent, the whole "I'm not a kid anymore, mom. No, you don't have to talk for me. I can do this myself." Every little kid at some point says to their mom, "I do it. I do it." Me. And also respecting that, respecting his autonomy, his agency, and knowing that the, you know, the deep dive intervention when he was younger was appropriate, and now it's time to step back because I did a really intense job early on and let him take over some responsibility for himself as an adult. And I'll make mistakes. We talk all the time. He comes in, we talk a lot. We have a very close relationship. But again, wouldn't have thought when he was 5, 15, he'd be driving. I never thought he'd be driving. He drives. It's like crazy.
So, for the parents out there that are in this intense phase early on and they're doing all of these things for their kid, with their kid, how do they start to create separation as all of this effort is fruitful and the kid is starting to learn things? How do they then shift that dynamic to allow for mistakes and faux pas and, burning themselves on a stove?
Yeah. Yeah. That's hard. I mean, I think that is the lifelong challenge of being a parent, being a mother, to be perfectly honest, is the acceptance that I, I read I read a book called Protecting the Gift by Gavin DeGraw. And in it, it talks about when you have kids, like your heart just comes right out of your body and it goes into this separate entity, and forever it's walking around, and it's gonna fall down. It's gonna be like, my heart, stop. And just kind of at some point understanding that it hurts. Even the joys sometimes, a, a, a boyfriend or girlfriend or someone, breaks their heart, and things like that. It's like you just want to go in and fix it and know that you can't. It's just some things you just have to live through. And that, I think, makes you um, a human. It shows you the joys and the challenges in life, and that you really can't have one without the other. And it's hard. And it's very hard um, to spend so much time putting your heart and your blood, your sweat, your tears into this, to have, you know, say to your kid, no, I don't want you to do that. You can't do that. I don't think you're ready. And then be 21 and kind of go, you know, I appreciate that, but you can't stop me. And so, and I get that from both of them, and of course I'm exaggerating because I don't do that. We have a good relationship, and I never, I'm not going to say no. Yeah, yeah. I think I had, rules, no tattoos. And then at 60, I got one. I had to call and get their permission. So I I hope I have grown and evolved as they grow and evolve. So that's the thing too, is that I did not stay stagnant throughout this whole process. I learned from my kids and had conversations, and they informed a lot of of my own growth and development as a parent by, saying, when you talk loud, mom, I don't really like that. And rather than go, I'm the parent here, and this is how I parent, I'm like, okay, you're a human being. I get that. There are things when my mom was raising me, I wish I'd have been able to say, but I know I couldn't, because then I, back. a little smack it like, don't get sassy with me. And I always told my kids, I said, it isn't what you say to me, it's how you say it to me. So I'm open to anything you would like to have a conversation about and talk to me about, but let's be careful about about making sure we respect each other and that we always try to find a way to have a conversation, difficult though it might be, in a way that leaves both of us at the end of the conversation feeling good about each other and not, tearing each other down. And so um, I have to do the same with them. Hunter says, I need you to back off. I need some space. I need to make this decision. Um, I have to be like, oh, I understand. And that just evolved over time.
When we were talking earlier, you mentioned how, this idea of a beautiful mirror. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Hunter joined a musical theater group when he was around 15 called the Miracle Project. And the beauty of it was that really was a blossoming um, moment in his life. And at the end of the first musical, several weeks they worked on um, musicals about um, things that were complicated for people with autism or other disabilities, like who will love me, being loved, being in love, meeting people. And and so he was in a musical, he was part of a group, and at the end of it, he got to speak. They gave him the microphone and he said, I found my people. I finally found the one place where I am accepted and loved unconditionally for who I am without having to be different. Like I will be a part of this for my whole life. And for many years, he was active, and now he's still a part of the group. But his life, he's in graduate school now, so it's a little busier with some other things. But he is still very much connected with many of the people that are there, and so one of the shows that they did was during COVID, and because people couldn't get together in person, they did a film, and it was called Journey to Namu. And in it, Hunter was the mirror. There were these students who were having some bad experiences in school, and they weren't really being appreciated for who they were as individuals. They were pretty much being told, you have to be the round peg in the round hole. They're like, but we're square. And they weren't being appreciated for being square. And so they kind of go off on this magical mystery tour kind of a thing into this never land. And Hunter is the mirror. And he sends them on these quests or journeys to find these pieces of mirror, which then, when they all come together, show that they are perfect just the way they are, and that as a group, they are perfect. And they're all different, but they're perfect just the way they are. So he was a reflection character of that. He was all in silver, and you know, but yeah, I wrote a poem about Hunter. Or a whole family, actually, a piece about us as planets. It's like the family origin story, and Hunter's character is Halix, and he is the moon with a dove's heart because Hunter is this big guy. And, when he was younger, he was rough and tumble and, kicking and everything. And now his heart is just so full of compassion. And so I do see him with this empathy, and it is very reflective. He wants to be good to people. He wants people to be good back to him. Um, yeah. I don't know if that really answered your question. I hope in some way.
It actually painted a beautiful picture. And in your day-to-day experience with Hunter, was he that mirror to you in the sense of he could tell when you're not doing well? He can show you, and sometimes with his behavior when he's young, and that became an indication like, oh, where where am I dysregulated right now? Was he able to reflect back to you to facilitate that growth that you shared?
Yeah. When he was little, and things are a little out of control for him, body kicking, and he was on a lot of different medications too, which were scary. They themselves would provoke things like, um, one day he thought the jelly beans had scissors. And he's screaming or trying to get ready for school, and I'm like, this is a problem. And he cried. He's like, Mom, please don't leave me. I'm sorry. I'm scared. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I know that sounds scary. And so when things like that would happen, or just even the meltdown sitting in the the green rocker, the chair, that lazy boy. I mean, I think I had it till they were in their 20s. But yeah, and rocking and just holding him and comforting him, and I'm there. Um, about a year ago, I had a similar incident. My mother's caregiver, and it's been challenging over a long period of time. And there was one time, and we had been to the hospital emergency room 12, 14 hours, like once a month for several months in a row. And there was just one particular time, and I was just like I, like I was just, ugh, it was just a lot. And he came up and he put his arms around me and he gave me a hug. And he goes, "I got you, Mom. I got you." And he just let me kind of have a little bit of a cry and held me like I used to hold him when he was a little boy, and just say to me, "You're not alone. Okay? I know you're doing it alone and it feels like you're alone, but I got you." I know. It makes me yeah.
The fact that you believed in him when he was young, it's like you created this space for him to fill it with all the love that he is.
Yeah. I didn't have a book. I didn't know at the time that I I didn't know what the end game would be. All I knew was that you know, I like to quote movies and things like that, but failure was not an option. Hunter is my Apollo 13, and I have to get him to wherever the end of the journey is in one piece. I have to bring him home, and I have to, and I didn't always know how that was going to happen, but I it's I sat in that chair with him a lot for long periods of time, and I am so glad I did. I am so glad I did because um, you know, he is in graduate school today. He's in graduate school and has the opportunity to have a life and hopefully meet someone that he falls in love with and marries, and or not, or not. That's the other thing too. Or not. You get to decide. And be with that.
What you said was just so beautiful, and I think it's a great moment to wrap this conversation up. And do you have any parting words, any advice for parents who either just got the diagnosis or are in the thick of it and don't know what's next?
Yeah. I know it's scary. And I know that there is a lot tied up in the expectation of this new life that's about to come into the world. You know, is it going to be a football player just like me, or is it going to be a cheerleader like me, or is it going to be a singer like me? Whatever the thing is, um, and you find out your kid is autistic, and you question, where do we go from here? And the one thing that I would encourage people, and it took me a while to get to this place, is that number one, they don't ask to come into this world. Number two, as much as we want them to be like us and do exactly what we do, or mini me's, they are individuals and they get to be individuals, and it's okay. And it doesn't mean that you're any less than a parent if you let your kid, you know, wear yellow shirts every day for a year, or to have a yellow birthday and get his teacher to wear a yellow shirt to school and put yellow balloons everywhere, um, because he's not weird. She's not weird. They just are different than from what you are, and that's okay. And you don't have to be just like your kids to be a human being and parent them. Just think, do you want to get hurt? No. Do you want your heart broken? No. Do you, want someone to talk mean to you because you don't like Brussels sprouts? No. Just, think of your own self as a kid and your own heart and what can you do maybe to uplift and love your kid in every single way you could have ever imagined and wanted. Um, and that will also help you get through because it's not easy. I can tell you right now, there were just times when there weren't enough hours in the day to get anything done, certainly to get any sleep for long periods of time. But I'm in my 60s now and I'm writing and I am having a life and I'm doing things that are different and never thought that I would be there. And part of that too is because I helped him get to where he could, I put in the time. I didn't start thinking about all the things I couldn't do in the moment because I had to do everything with him and for him. And now he's in graduate school and I'm getting to do some things for myself. And it feels really wonderful because he asks me questions and he's interested. Oh, are you going to go on a writing retreat? And what are you writing about now? And I get so much more. I've gotten so much more back from both my kids than I feel like sometimes I ever really gave by just spending time. And, and, they're not always going to be 5, not always going to be 5, not always going to be 15, not even going to always be 25. So just realize that, take a deep breath, a bath, read, meditate, find some friends, some good friends. But I'll be honest with you, I did a lot. My husband traveled quite a bit and I didn't have a friend group. A lot of people didn't understand. So I was by myself a lot with my kids, both of them. And I actually found a place of appreciation for that time that even with my daughter, who wasn't autistic, I took time I might not have taken if Hunter hadn't been autistic. I was forced to spend time with my children in ways I never thought I would. And I'm so glad I did. I wouldn't do anything different.
It sounds like the experience you had with Hunter being your first taught you that parenting isn't just about all the doing, but it's actually about just being with them.
Yeah. And that you're not the same parent to every single kid that you have. They're all different people, and you have to, tweak the parenting because what's good for one isn't good for another. Maybe one is really independent, and so kind of stepping back, but still being encouraging on the sidelines. And maybe the other one needs to be drawn out more and saying, "Let's try this, let's do this." You know, they're all different, so it's really in spending the time is when you can learn their nuances. You can learn those quiet little things that when they're not talking and you look at their face, you know what they're thinking. And do they need me to hug them right now? Do they need me to ask if they want to be hugged? Because that comes up too at some point. Can I hug you? It's not just a given anymore that when they were little, I could pick them up and hold them and give them a big kiss. My daughter likes her space. And so it's like, do you need a hug? Um, and to respect that.
Thank you so much for joining me. I will post some links that, anything that you referenced. Is there any way that people can contact you or learn more from you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, DM me. Cindy Rucker Trost, not too hard to find. In the social media world, I'm not hugely out there, and my accounts are private. But if you DM me and you say that you mentioned the podcast and uh, Dr. Meyer, then I'll get back to you.
I will post that in the show notes as well. Have also invited Hunter to join me in an upcoming episode so that you can get to hear his perspectives about some of these things that we talked about and just learn more about this incredible individual that Cindy talked to us about today.
Thank you, Julia.
Cool. Thank you.